Good afternoon. I hope that you enjoyed lunch and that your conversations were both interesting and productive. It'll be my pleasure in a moment to introduce Congressman Elijah Cummings. But before doing so, I would like to be able to introduce the poet who will lead off this section, and that's Nakia Brown. So, from DewMore Baltimore, let me turn it to you to lead off this part of the program.
This is dedicated to Michelle Alexander and all the people that she advocated for. When I was 13, I got locked up, and I was in a holding cell. And there were 5 boys in the cell across from me. 4 out of 5 of them will be considered 3/5 of a man. And there are 5 walls. 4 that surround us, and 1 that is made of our skin. Blacks are always in a double prison. But I could smell the hope of white privilege. One Caucasian who knew DJS was not meant for his DNA, handcuffs were allergic to his helix. He bounced freedom off his tongue because he could taste it. I watched westward expansion walk out of the felony while every single boy of color returned for a crime less severe. But why should we care? Why should we care about a few black boys that committed a crime, but we should care that we are criminalized before we even commit one? I met my public defender a few minutes before my rights were going to be surrendered. I didn't even need a representative from the state. My face gave a testimony before I could talk. I am a black girl, which means in a courtroom my skin is shackle ready. But what if I made you inferior based on the color of your eye? Denied your right to vote based on your body size, because kinky can break combs but will not break complacency nor white supremacy. Yet people will say, I don't see color. Look in a prison if you are feeling colorblind. That out of the 2.3 million people in prison, more than half are people of color, because as a nation led by Ronald Reagan, we chose incarceration instead of rehabilitation. Health issues are never addressed in the institution because the institution itself is a health issue. A retired police chief told the New York Times he was offered tanks, bazookas, and anything else he wanted. The Pentagon develops monetary incentives to ensure military practices on common people so that your mother, your grandmother, your brother, your sister, your cousin, your aunt, uncle are all public enemy number 1. But when was the last time a SWAT team was in a suburb? Threw a grenade in a mansion without probable cause. The only difference is race. Because statistically, blacks and whites use and sell drugs at similar rates, and blacks just lack the private space. So the outdoor market is more acceptable to arrest. Police target us because it is easy. Because we are already on the corner and criminalized. What we call the hood is the aftermath of a battlefield. Put a blue light in a white man's house. Bloomberg, his neighborhood. Stop and frisk his sons and daughters. Make them spread eagle until you want to get your eagle. Every year, $70 billion sustains the prison industrial complex. They will spend more money imprisoning us than feeding us. It is never about the prison time. It is about the prison label. Because felon is an alternative word for slave. And what has changed since the collapse of Jim Crow has less to do with the basic structure of society and more to do with the language we use to justify it. So I refuse consent. You can bring your dog and even your firing squad. I am tired of the American dream being shattered with shackles I will not identify. How many leaders of ours must die before we decide that not tomorrow, next year, 5 years, a decade, or a century from now, but now is the only time structure we will ever believe in. We are all just prisoners, incarcerated in the belief that we have time to make change happen. But I will never hope for change. I spend every single day fighting for it, because as long as the system of white supremacy thrives, slavery will never die.
If there's one representative that we have for whom the issues of incarceration, excessive incarceration, and squandered resources is personal and passionate, it's Congressman Elijah Cummings. Elijah Cummings is well known to everyone who sits here as our representative from most of Baltimore to the U.S. Congress. He grew up here, went to high school here, went to college at Howard University, where he was Phi Beta Kappa. And if I can tell one story, Congressman, I remember distinctly you once saying that when you were in elementary school, people wrote you off. Teachers wrote you off. And there was a teacher in the 6th grade or 7th grade who said, wait a minute. This is not a young man who's intellectually impaired. This is a young man who the system has impaired. And I see the potential in him. Phi Beta Kappa at Howard University, went on to law school at the University of Maryland, went on to represent the people of Baltimore in the state legislature, and the people of Baltimore and Howard County in the U.S. Congress. He has been a powerful, consistent, articulate, and brilliant voice for those who are the least advantaged among us. Thank you for joining us today, Congressman.
Good afternoon, everyone. To Dr. Robert Blum, I want to thank you for your very kind words. Provost Robert Lieberman, the Johns Hopkins Urban Health Institute, and for all of our panelists, our guests, our experts, and the entire Hopkins family. I am indeed honored to be here. You know, it's interesting when I heard the wonderful young lady. Oh, there she is. It just made me do a lot of thinking about, I was running a little bit late today, and one of the reasons I was running a little late is because a medical student in my block, I live in the inner city, he's not a medical student here, but had been put out of his apartment because he had run out of money. This was a black man who had worked hard, and we were trying to make sure that he was okay. And you know, I just keep thinking about what African American men in particular, the obstacles to being successful are just simply phenomenal. And then even when they are a success, you look at a man like the president, they still don't want to give you your due. Come on now, don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about. That's right. And so I'm not going to be long. And I've really debated on how to approach this, because as an African American man one whose mother and father only had a second-grade education, former sharecroppers, and to have gotten to where I've gotten to at 63 years old and to be a member of the Congress of the United States of America, and then having gotten to this point, Ellsworth Bay, and then to get to a point where you have a voice, and then to have somebody shut my voice off. It's hard. A lot of people think that when they get to the point that I've gotten to, that we don't experience the racism that you talked about. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, it's alive and well, sadly. But I don't usually get into race because one of the things I've noticed is that when you start talking about race, what happens is people automatically say, oh, you're throwing the race card up. And it becomes a distraction, Tiger, a distraction from getting things done, getting the things that you need to get done. And I know some of you all may not really understand what I just said, but when you've lived enough and you've seen enough, and let me give you an example. I'll never forget when Joe Wilson on the floor of the House, Congressman Joe Wilson on the floor of the House, called the president a liar. Do you remember that? And the next morning, I just so happened to be on Morning Joe. And Joe Scarborough and I are good friends, because we served in the Congress together. And he said, Elijah, wasn't that horrible? What Joe Wilson did? Oh, that was horrible. And I said, Joe, I'm not even going to talk about it. I said, because Joe Wilson is who he is. And he is going to be that same person probably for the next 30 years. But I got a man, Joe, that I just left in the inner city of Baltimore who has colon cancer and can't get treated. I want to concentrate on his disease and not Joe Wilson. Hello. And the reason being is that as you get older, you begin to address an issue that so many people don't address, and that is you understand that your own mortality is at issue. And so the question becomes, when I had reluctance even coming to this conference, because I want to make sure that we are effective and efficient. Under Armour has come up with a new slogan. It used to be, protect this house, and now it's just two words. I will. I will. And so, as I dangerously stray away from my notes, I know my staff go. I often think about the story of the fishermen who are fishing downstream, and then they see babies floating in the water. You know the story. So they save a baby or two, and then the fisherman says, I'm running upstream. I said, where you going, man? Why are you going upstream? He said, I want to see who's throwing these babies in the water from upstream. Ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of babies being thrown in the water. And one of the things that we have to begin to address is what's happening upstream. What is happening upstream? As many of you know, I am working with a school called the Maritime Institute. And the Maritime Institute is a high school in Baltimore. And I've been working with the school for several years now. And one of the things that concern me most is the whole question of why in 2014, the question becomes, Tiger, why am I receiving from upstream boys and girls who are in the 9th grade who cannot read? That's upstream. That's upstream. And then folks turn around and say, how do they end up in prison? How do they end up with a record? Let me give you a footnote, by the way. Let's do some footnoting here. It's not just the incarceration. As a lawyer who practiced many years, I can tell you the real sentence is the record. The incarceration is very, very significant. But even if there is no incarceration, even if the incarceration is for a limited time, the record, the criminal record, follows folks until they die. Until they die. And so what you have is a situation upstream. And we've got to be very honest about our education system. And at some point, we have to stop saying to each other that everything is okay. Because it's not okay. We've got to stop coming to conferences and smiling at each other, saying everything is fine. We've got to stop getting caught up in our rituals and not deal with our reality. I often try to dissect my life and wonder how I got to where I got to. Mother and father preachers. I say I had double coverage. A community where we had recreation centers. Mother and father, mother would go out and do domestic work. Daddy would go out and do chemical work as a laborer. But then there was Mr. Smith, a former drill sergeant at the South Baltimore Recreation Center. And he took care of all 700 or 800 of us. Remember Tiger? And there are a whole lot of Mr. Smiths who took care of us, who embraced us. And I get the impression that so often when budgets are being cut, the Mr. Smiths of the world get lost in the process. And they play such an important role. That's upstream. A lot of people say, well, Elijah, and I hear this in Washington a lot, they shouldn't go out there and have those babies. You're not taking care of them. And you know what it reminds me of? When I was teaching my sister to drive. Oh, my God. So I'm going to have a heart attack. When I was teaching her to drive, I'll never forget, we were on Emerson Avenue, Bay, and we were riding along, and a man steps out in front of the car. I jammed on the brake. You know how when you're teaching somebody to drive, you act like you driving. I jammed on the brake. I said, why didn't you hit the brake? She said, he shouldn't have been there. I said, well, he was there. Upstream. Upstream. And so, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things, if you're going to do your research, you do your research on this. And by the way, at some point, we got to stop researching. I mean, we research the research. And she said it, oh, she said it so well. I don't remember the exact words, but basically what she said is that we have to act because people are living now. They are dying now. They have a limited amount of time to be where they are now. And the urgency is now. Did I get you going right? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, so upstream, education, we underestimate, we have gotten, oh God, we've gotten to a point where we accept normal as being some kids do fine and other ones don't do fine. And they basically become collateral damage. That's how we treat them. And one of the things that I found interesting about upstream, some people act like the children never grow up. Come on now, don't act like y'all don't know what I'm talking about. Everybody at the birthday party, 1-year-old baby, got everything. Everybody show up. By the time the baby get by the middle school, nobody shows up. Upstream. So number one, we got to deal with education. Another thing we've got to deal with is a sense of belonging. I know that sounds simple, but I can remember distinctly something when I was growing up. I was trying to belong to everything I could. I wanted to be, we didn't have much to join. I wanted to join the band, but to rent the horn was 50 cents a year, and my daddy didn't have it. I can still remember the band beat. I can remember it. It went something like this. It's got, so I used to practice because I wanted to belong to something. Join the Cub Scouts. In my living room, there's my favorite picture of my brother and I. And I've got the only part of a Cub Scout uniform I could find at the Salvation Army that was a belt that was too big. And in the picture that sits in my living room, the belt is so big, it goes all the way down to my knee. But I was proud to have my belt because I wanted to belong. I wanted to simply belong. And so then, when I got a chance to join the safety patrol, oh, I was a great safety patrol leader. I would practice. Got elevated to captain. That meant I was in charge of giving out the raincoats. When it rained, I would pray that it would rain. I wanted to belong. And then I look at Howard County, where I represent now. All types of activities for children to belong in. The things that I just named, Boy Scout, Cub Scout, band, and safety patrol. That was it. Oh, and the recreation center. Mr. Smith went out and got the Dixie Waste Company. They dealt in scrap metal. Got the Dixie Waste Company to donate some uniforms. And we would have to, he made up these little league, this little league, Yankees, Dodgers. I hope I got some South Baltimore people here. Yankees, Dodgers, all these different names. And we were so poor, we had to take the uniforms, we would play a baseball game, softball, and then we had to take the uniforms home and wash them and bring them back the next day. But I belonged. And then there was church. This is upstream South. So we need to figure out how do we, if we do not have that kind of stuff that children can belong to and be a part of, how do we not address it the way my sister was addressing her driving? How do we face it and say, okay, this is what we must do right now for our children upstream? And we need to use the words, I will. There's another piece to this, though. I was talking to Senator Sarbanes not long ago, and I know I shocked a lot of people. I know I did. I said, Senator Sarbanes, I really thank you for what you've done. I said, I remember the day when you would help black judges get appointed when it was unpopular. And I said, you did something that nobody else could do. And I said, your power became, largely, a lot of your power was you speaking it as a white person. Come on now, don't act like y'all don't know what I'm talking about. Because certain times, if I say certain things, there they go again. I said, but when you said it, it made a difference. And you were bold enough to do it. And what I'm saying to you, all of us must be a part of this solution to this problem. It is not just a black problem. All of us must join forces to be a part of this. And so, that's upstream. When we come downstream a little bit, I don't have to tell you the stats. I don't have to go through how many young African American men are sitting in prison, nonviolent offenses. I don't have to tell you how the population of young African, when I see a young African American man come into my office looking for a job, I say hallelujah. And one of the things I always ask them, tell me about your background. How did you avoid the obstacles that were put in your way? And most of them talk about upstream stuff. But now let's get down to this prison situation. You know, having served in politics now for 32 years, I never forget when I was in the state legislature, there was this big fear. Everybody was worried. Oh, you're going to be soft on crime. Oh, you're going to be so soft on crime. And everybody was worried. And everybody was fearful of being soft on crime. But the interesting thing is it seemed as if the people who, if there was a hard on crime, it would seem to be very much disproportionately in the African American community. When I talk to young kids at American and University and other places. And I asked them, I said, I want everybody to close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. Put your head down on the desk. How many of you all used an illegal drug in the last 30 days? Don't lie. Don't lie. More than half the hands are up. These are not black people. I live in the inner city. I have been in the same house for 32 years. What you talked about, I have seen it. Young man with his girlfriend standing on the corner trying to get the bus to get to a movie. Anybody been there? Just trying to get to a movie. Cops jump out, have him pull his pants down in front of his girlfriend. Check him out, nothing there, see ya. He is forever wounded. That's right. He's forever wounded. He just want to be a man. He just want to be a man. So then he turns to his girlfriend. She's trying to comfort him. But there's been something that has been stripped away. And he can never see officer as friendly again if he did from Jump Street. I remember when I was a little boy talking about Upstream. Tiger, I remember this. 55 years ago, men would be playing crap in the alley. I'm a little boy. They're doing dice, gambling in the alley. You remember, Tiger? Okay, that was you? Okay. Right on cue. The police would come. They would scare them away and take the money. I remember that. Would take the money and walk away. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that we are moving in the right direction with regard to what the Attorney General has done, with what the state legislature is trying to do. But I keep going back to the whole idea of the record. I had we have a jobs fair. And I always go to the jobs fair and walk around. And I can tell you when I go to the jobs fair, there's always somebody who comes up to me and says, Congressman, thank you for trying. I can't get no job. I can't get no job. You got all these employers here, but nobody will give me a shot. Nobody. And I hear these words over and over again. I hear it every day. And it goes something like this. Mr. Cummings, Mr. Cummings, man, like I respect you, man. You're all right with me. But, Mr. Cummings, I can't get no job, Jack. I can't get no job. And Mr. Cummings, much respect, bro. But if I can't get no job, I can't feed my family. I can't live. I got to do something. Son, you've heard this. I got to do something. What is he supposed to do? And so if we got to deal with the record part. So I was glad to hear the state's attorney talk about doing ticketing for certain offenses as opposed to creating a record. And let me tell you, can I tell you, and then I'm going to finish up with this. I remember when I first started practicing law in 1977. I will never forget this as long as I live. I went down to Montgomery County, and the state's attorney said, Congressman, I wasn't a congressman. So, Mr. Cummings, I think we can work something out for your client. I said, is that right? Yes, I think we can work this out. I said, how do you work that out? We have something here called intake. I said, in what? He said, intake. He said, intake, what happens is that we bring them in after an offense, we talk to them, we work out a little counseling thing, no charges, no record, let them go. I said, are you serious? He said, yes, we've been doing it for years. I'd never heard of intake in Baltimore City. That was back in 1977. And so, there are little boys who started upstream. Many of them had big dreams. Some wanted to be the doctor. Some wanted to own the business. They had big dreams upstream. And then something came along, some adults came along. And the adults looked at them and said, you know what? We're going to do what we can, but maybe we won't have such high expectations of them. And by the way, one of the things about upstream, we got to have higher expectations of our children. So often we have low expectations. And so they're still upstream, trying to get downstream. And then something happens and they don't learn to read. Or they're placed in special ed, like I was placed. Placed in special ed, told that you will never be able to read. How can you do that to a child? When you told the counselor, I want to be a lawyer. So you can never be a lawyer. And asked you the question, the counselor asked me, who do you think you are? And so you have a combination of things going. But ladies and gentlemen, oh God, if I could just beg you to do one thing. Study, but hold the study and apply it to something. Do something. Do something. I have a cousin who served 40 years, still in jail. We grew up next door to each other. Still in jail. Other young men. I remember as a little boy, they used to say to us, young men would disappear. And they would say they went to Chuckenham. You remember that? That's how they pronounced it. Chuckenham. I didn't know what Chuckenham was. And then they disappear. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got to reverse some of this. And you all have the power to do it. And I'm going to close on this. You have the power to do it. And you can do it. And so we've got to be about a movement of liberation. I remember when I went to Howard's graduation. I always go to Howard's graduation. I graduated from Howard. I go to Howard graduation. I've gone for every year since 1973. Most of the time, I don't even know nobody graduated. You know why I go? Because I want to feel good. I sit there, I don't care if it's sun, rain. I go to Howard's graduation. You know why? Because I want to see those young African-American students marching into the future, the ones that, oh God, the ones who were able to navigate upstream and downstream, and to go out there and make a difference in the world. I just go to see them. I go to hear the grandmother. I be just so nosy as I can be. I try to listen for the conversations and hear the grandmother who's saying, "That's my grandchild. That's the first one. You know, the first one to graduate from college." I want to hear it. I want the good feeling. Leaving 2014 Madison Avenue, I need some good feeling. And so, at Howard, we find over and over and over again young people going out into the world trying to make a difference. And one of the things that I noticed, when I went to the last graduation, Bill Clinton spoke. And I wanted to hear the president. But Brother Bay, the person who stole the show, was the president of the class. And she just said one thing I'll never forget. She gave a real short speech. She said, "To all of you, I just beg you to do one thing." She says, "I want you to go out there and create a liberated future." I wish I had invented the statement. Liberated! Right now, black men and black women and others are not liberated. You cannot be liberated with a record. You cannot be liberated if you can't vote. You're not liberated if you can't take advantage of living in certain types of housing. You are not liberated when nobody hears you. Nobody hears you. When Michelle wrote her book, she talked about the reason why she wrote the book is because she herself could not hear folk who had been in the criminal justice system. That's downstream. That's why the panel that's about to come up is so important. We need to hear from them. And do me a favor. Don't go into no pity party stuff. You know why? Because so often we get so caught up in the pity. I'm talking about when you hear. Don't take that energy and turn it into doing something. I beg you. And so that wasn't the speech I intended to make. But thank you.
Congressman, thank you. I think you would be interested to know that we have asked each person to say what one thing they will do as a function of being here and around these issues. I'd like to invite the next panel to come and join us in the front. I think this is